Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually majors in on geopolitics. So really that's everything around you in the world that functions and makes you think how you should function. And what I mean by that is that government states, what they do is they push forward an idea of how the world is. Indeed, actually, big business does it. You can't get away from it. It's in the media, it's everywhere. So what that does is it suggests how you should react amongst yourself in the community, but also how we as nations should react with other nations, hence the geopolitics, and how we then function. So in doing the show, what I can do is speak with people from a massive different areas, because we could all connect in onto this aspect of this is how the world works. So today's guest, and I'm very, very happy to have him on, is Charles D'Amico. Now, I've pronounced that incorrectly. I know I have, because I'm kind of doing it like it's Spanish or like it's Italian. But I'm sure there's an American version of how you pronounce the name, Charles. So if you could pronounce it for me correctly, that would be great.
Well, I can never remember if there's the apostrophe when I email it. So it's D'Amico. It's Italian for the friend.
Yeah, D'Amico. Yeah. Super. That's brilliant. Is that a name actually that your family had when they came to the United States? Or has it been somehow anglicized a little bit?
So that's my father's name. D'Amico is their name. My grandfather on my mother's side, they changed his name.
Right, gotcha. Brilliant. Well, listen, it's fantastic to have you on. What I want to just do is give you a very quick outline why you're on the show, and also tell them of your artistic side. So what Charles is he is a novelist. But in addition to that, he's also a kind of in my world, because he has got a degree in, well, you've got two, haven't you, Charles, actually? You've got one in psychology and one in criminology. So I've got one in criminology as well, so that's where we connect. And then he's also a publisher, I understand. So he has his own publishing company, and I believe a couple of other bits and baps on the side. So if you can explain what you do in general in the round, we can get in then to the discussion.
The short version is I squeeze water out of a rock on a regular. I own a bunch of restaurant franchises in the U.S. I'm building my 11th store in 4 cities. I have a publishing company, an editing platform called Book Puma. We've got some pretty cool international editors. I'm an author of the Neil Baggio series and the Maria Perdita series. And all around, I'm a purveyor of information. I love international politics. I follow the BBC. I follow Al Jazeera. I drive a lot, so I listen to all different kinds of information. And I don't know, I like to stretch my brain as far as it can go. I mean, it's
brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So basically you are heaven made for the show. because
like I'm hoping this is the beginning of me popping in regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so, because you are an influencer, and I don't mean in the terms of how people use it on TikTok or something. I mean in terms of the reality of how geopolitics works. I mean, if you've got your own restaurants, you're giving people food, etc., etc., so you're pushing a perspective that way. I don't mean pushing in a negative way, but I'm just meaning you're providing to individuals in that way. You've also got your publishing company. Now, that's very, very important, because the media is, phenomenal. It's how we think about things. It tells people. You've then moved into your area of being an author and doing writing fiction. So again, fiction is actually quite a good way often to put forward a world view. So, and then you've got several other companies knocking on the side. So to be fair, you're the entrepreneur type of person that fits perfectly to the show. Can I just jump into your life to start off with? I mean, how did Charles start off? How did he get to this? What's his background?
So the synopsis is my parents, my biological father and my mother got divorced when I was young. He was, as we're getting older, we're starting to realize, brilliant man, electrician. My mother was super artistic, so I got both sides of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
There was a period that I was the youngest of a whole generation. So I'm the youngest of all my cousins. My sister's almost 3 years older than me. So I was the child in the room of adults because there was nobody left. And so I had a slightly different perspective than most growing up. When there was a lot of arguing going on, I was the fixer. I kind of became, I always say I have Superman syndrome, right? Like I kind of grew up trying to fix everything. And which is where the entrepreneur kind of spirit came from. I grew up in Metro Detroit. I was working when the auto industry collapsed, and I watched all these people lose everything important to them. I want to say about 20, 21. And I started to look around. I was like, man, I don't trust that somebody's going to work harder than me and care for my well-being. And eventually just it kind of clicked, and I was like, I got to figure out how to do this on my own. And that's kind of what set me on the path of trying to do things for myself. And it just kind of one thing just kind of kept going. And I always say making bad decisions with good information and then trying to make it look like a good decision is the short version of my life.
Right. Okay. So Charles, let me ask you, when you say you're about 21 and the auto industry, what year are we talking about?
Was it 07, 08?
Right. So the world crash. Yeah. So you're talking about, when you were saying that, I was looking and thinking earlier, because I thought Detroit started to lose a lot of its shine earlier in the 90s and stuff like that. But you're saying 07, 08, it was still kicking.
In the early 90s, I would have been like 10, 11. So I would have been around for it, but I don't know if I would have felt enough to understand it. So when my parents got divorced, we kept the house and then kind of moved in with my aunt. But we were always the brokest kid in a middle-class neighborhood. And I had this long talk with my stepdad who had adopted. She's like, no, but he's like, you had a nice home. And I was like, everybody in the neighborhood when you're a kid knows you're the broke kid. They just,
right.
They do. Like you might have had a different lifestyle, but I did. Like the kids knew. When I'm wearing their old T-shirt with their old stain on it, like they knew. Mm-hmm. And it's just now after like years of having this conversation, he's starting to click. But I think a lot of those things had lasting impacts on me in a good way to where it gave me a different perspective. One of my favorite phrases is, a superpower is empathy, but don't confuse it with sympathy. And and being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding where they come from and being able to either help or maybe not put as much energy into the situation because you understand where it's coming from is huge.
Well, let me hit on two things. I'm sorry to break in, but let me hit on two things. Because in our system, which is a total class system in Britain, okay, it's lessening now, but for years has been, you had the ruling elite, the aristocracy. So obviously above that, the king, queen, depending on what time it was, the aristocracy under them, the landowners. Then you had the mercantile classes, and actually they were even looked down upon, let's say, a century ago, because they're actually working, so they were looked down upon. Then you had the middle class type of thing, which are people who were working for the mercantile classes or whatever around that area. And then you had the working class. Now, the two questions are, what do you perceive as the American working class? That's the first thing, because for those of you who don't know, you are an American. I know you spoke about Detroit, but if people didn't pick that up, you are an American. The show goes out worldwide, obviously. So there's that aspect. But secondly, in terms of you saying you were the brokest kid in the area, give me a feel how wealthy or not the area was, because in your system, as I believe, and you're going to explain it to me, it's more about money than about status and, long-term class.
Things have changed, obviously, with social media, but I would say, in the 80s and 90s, it was house and car, right? How big was your house? What car did you drive? Especially in Detroit, right? It was, what car did you have? And it still is. I mean, you see people who live in the ghetto where their house is not much bigger than 100 feet in a bathroom, but they drive a $150,000 car because that's where the status comes from. So when I say I was the brokest kid in the middle class neighborhood, you're talking where maybe the median income at the time was $40,000. And so that neighborhood, the median income was probably 65. And it was the average house was the average house would be something like what you guys would call maybe like a flat, like a 2-bedroom flat.
Yeah.
But my parents had a 3 to 4 bedroom colonial, 2-story, nice backyard, driveway. So like it was a nice neighborhood. But this is America, but we have no public transit. And this is Detroit, you have to have a car, right?
Yeah.
So if you didn't have a car and if you didn't have a means to get around, it drastically changed what you did. Now, I rode my bike everywhere. I had a friend who lived about, let's say for you guys, it might be 2 kilometers away internationally. And I would ride my bike everywhere to go meet him, and then we would kind of hang out. And I actually, as I gotten older, I've realized that's where the entrepreneurial spirit came from. I remember jumping in trash cans and dumpsters to get cans, to recycle, to get money, to buy baseball cards, to trade for, I did literally mini businesses without realizing it. I've just kind of had, without realizing it, it's just always been a part of who I was. I just figured it out. And I think it came from being the outside kid in all those environments. So when I say being the brokest kid, it's kind of like living in the mercantile class where you're not upper class, you're not lower class, but your family's kind of faking it. I would say you have one toe in the pool, but nobody knows how to swim, right? Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Love it. Love that analogy. So that's super. So that's you. You're 21. You've seen the circumstance. You know where you are. You're starting this movement on the way up. What was your first role? But you got a degree. You got the degree before you were 21 or post you being 21?
So I was working for this restaurant franchise called Jimmy John's. It's a sandwich shop. It was right after college. I wasn't. My original plan with my criminology psychology background was to go into the military and then transfer to the FBI or the NSA. I had destroyed my knee right before my senior year, and they wanted me to do a bunch of tests. I passed them all. When I went through processing, all my paperwork was wrong.
For which service? For FBI or for NSA? Which?
For the Army.
For the Army, sorry, first. Yeah.
And then, so I was supposed to go in as an officer, and they had as enlisted one. And I was like, no. I didn't go to all this schooling to walk in like some 18-year-old kid off the street. Yeah. And while they were working on the paperwork, I took a restaurant job that I really liked and never looked back. So essentially a clerical error drastically changed my life. Right. And during that time, while I was kind of just working and trying to figure things out, another collapse of the auto industry happened. And then things just kind of kept turning from there.
Sorry. So I'm just trying to fit you nicely into our perspective. So you wanted the Army, but you were educated. Obviously, you've been to college. Now that's quite expensive in the United States, isn't it, to get into college? So how did you afford the college, or is that what your parents were saving up for, which is why you were if you will, the poorest kid on the block because the money was being saved to send you to college. I mean, how did that work is what I'm asking.
So by the time when I was a kid, we were the poorest kid. My dad slowly started getting better jobs, and then things kind of changed by the time I got to high school. And then I got like half scholarships. My mom taught at a really prestigious high school. And back, the school she taught at was private, and they paid her next to nothing, but the trade-off was I got to go to a really expensive private high school.
Ah, right. Excellent. Yeah. So better schooling, greater opportunity. You're able then maybe to be pushed through the system in terms of being educated to success, et cetera, et cetera. Is that? Yep.
Oh, yeah. I swear up and down, my high school was one of the reasons I'm successful to this day. I still talk to one of my old professors from high school until he passed away, the old principal from my high school. It's the main focal point of the second book I wrote is my old high school.
Right.
It's a big part of my life was my high school. I mean, it's an old boarding school.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So it's I didn't board there, but that's kind of like it was started in the 1800s. It was an old military academy that transitioned into just kind of a private Catholic high school.
So it's something like what we call our public schools. See, because in Britain, the public school is not what you think for the public. The public school is a paid school, okay? The state school is a normal school. So the public school, you've probably heard of Eton and places like that.
Yeah.
So those are the public schools. I mean, obviously Eton is the highest level of the public school, where your fees are probably in excess of 30,000 a term, so those are, and hence that's where practically all our prime ministers come from. So
20,000 a semester.
Yeah. Incredible amount.
I actually did a podcast for most of the pandemic with a guy I met through Instagram in the UK.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. We just getting to know each other. So it was slowly kind of connecting with the getting to know the UK. He was one of the first vegans in the military to kind of push that lifestyle and kind of get to know, dietary understanding of what they were putting through the military. And his name was Ross Cooney. He was a pretty cool dude out there. I guess.
Never heard of him, I must admit, but who knows? The way the world is, you can never know. So great. So we know where you are now. We've got you settled. And now we're going to have you. So first and foremost, you took these courses because you want to be FBI or NSA. And for those who don't know, National Security Agency is equivalent to GCHQ, but yours is on steroids. And what
everything over here is, right?
Absolutely, everything's on steroids. So what you're doing is you're working in what signals intelligence we used to call it in the old days, and now it's changed to mainly electronics and various other issues, computers, blah blah blah, eavesdropping, etc., etc. So that's what you were going to. So you must have had some computer aspect, but then you talked about the FBI, which is more kind of hands-on. So it's more of an investigative tool. They do have secret intelligence aspects because it is your security agency as well. But there's also criminal aspects to it. So which were you interested in, the criminal part or the secret intelligence part? Which was your interest?
I wanted to do profiling on the highest of levels. I wanted to, and it was just a matter of which tip of the knife I ended up going towards. I was open to whichever direction they wanted to send me. I still am really good at it. I can read a room really fast. Mm-hmm. I can pick up somebody's motivations almost instantly. It's I don't know. It's just been a skill that comes from trauma as a kid. You pick up on micro expressions really fast. And I mean, I've been able to use it in the world I operate in. I've got 200 employees and they still laugh. I'll walk in after, because I'm into 4 cities, and after watching just the way they communicate in our Slack channels or, communications, that came in, why is this bothering you? Like, how'd you know? Like, Don't worry about it. Like, I just, I know, it's all that matters. And I do miss it sometimes, but I filled that gap with writing.
Yes.
And that's kind of, so it's been kind of a way to help me and then I also just educate myself with what's going on. So it allows me to kind of keep tabs as much as I can with the thing I wanted to do, the passions I had. I can stay connected to people, use my imagination, try to solve problems, and then just stay abreast of the situations.
So this is you now, Charles. You're out. You've basically didn't go into that area. You went into the food facility area. So when do you actually then start to go down these other avenues of writing books, of being an author, of being a publisher? When does that pick up?
So I actually wrote 2 books right after college, before I even got into restaurants. I dislocated my ankle playing basketball, and I had to keep my leg up for about 3 months. I got bored of everything about 2 weeks in, and was never big on reading fiction. And just nothing, it excited me. And my sister was a huge reader. She'd like rip through an Anne Rice book in like 3 days. So, they look like a gigantic phone book. You can hurt somebody with it. And I think I still to this day think I kind of started writing out of spite. And I was like, well, I'm going to write a book. And she's like, you don't read enough to write. And I'm like, well, there's nothing I like. That's why I don't read. So I just started writing, and I ended up writing 2 books, which is Veritas and Ave Maria. I wrote both of them in about 90 days, the first versions at least. I don't know, right after college, would have been like 04, 05. So it would have been like 22, 23. And they were like an uneducated 23-year-old wrote them. And then they sat in a drawer for 10 years. And I had plenty of weird jobs over the years, to pay the bills. And at one point I was ghostwriting bank blogs. And I had an editor who kind of was ruthless, like tearing me up.
I'm going to stop you. I don't want to stop you, but I'm going to stop you. Bank logs. What's that?
Bank blogs. So like if you were to go onto a bank website and be like, Steve thinks this of the market this week. So essentially taking information, but making it easily readable. Like today in the market, you will notice that commodities are going up in soybeans. Like I would make it, you could actually digest it. Yep. So it wouldn't just be like talking about the numbers. It'd be the reasons behind things.
Gotcha.
So instead of just giving you numbers, I would paint a picture and write a story, like a 2-paragraph story. And I would just write this kind of not poetic, but a short story about what was going on. And then all these, because these bigger banks were owning all these small community banks, and they would put it on the small community bank's website with somebody else's name on it.
So basically what you're trying to do is bring people into the banking fiduciary world by making it interesting. Am I picking it up right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And it's not like you're not selling them anything. You're just, because these guys knew the information better than I did. I was just communicating it in a more edible fashion, right? Like I was kind of dumbing it down in a way. And he used to say, he's like, do you know what a comma is? Like, he's like, you can write stuff extremely fast. And he's like, you have a way of writing that's awesome. But he's like, come on. And I was like, well, funny story. I wrote a couple books like 10 years ago. Would you look at one of them? And that's kind of how this whole thing started. And super. He's like, this is actually really good. He's like, I've never edited a book. He's like, but I'll give you some notes. So I started rewriting it. And he's like, you need to find a real editor. So I found my first real editor. And they were like, you need a better editor than me. And this process kept kind of going. And I eventually found an editor who actually worked with Eisenhower. The dude was in his 80s. He was pretty on his way out. He's like, I'm almost done. I'm just looking for one last kind of
impressive
client to work with. And I couldn't stop writing. By the time he got done editing my first 2 books, I'd already written 4 more. I ended up writing 14 books, about 1 million words in the course of 13 months. And he gave me kind of my first round of notes on all of them. And
so he read them all?
Yeah. And
incredible.
Yeah. And then, so I have, let's see, the Neil Baggio series, 4 books are out, but I've got Concilium, Ignis, and Copti, 3 more. So there's 7 in that series already done, but 4 are out. Then there's the Marie Perdita series, which is a female spinoff. Purdue is out. That came out in November. Then there's 2 more, La Chazée and Atrove. And then Frank's Journal, which is the killer's perspective of the Neil Baggio series, which has been written and edited about 400 times. That's hope to come out this year. And then I wrote a Western spin-off series in the 1800s just for fun. That should also come out in about a year. And then there's a book called One Golden Day I wrote, which is kind of an homage to all the advice my mother and grandmother gave me before they passed away. It's life advice and relationship advice kind of given to you because it's first person. There are flashbacks in this person's advice. So without you realizing it, it's a self-help book.
Yeah.
It's a story. So like it's kind of cool.
So when you're looking at this at your storylines, you're choosing one. What is informing you? What part of your life is informing you?
You mean like what got me? What
you're writing a book, so you sit down, you're in front of your computer,
all of it.
Yeah. But what's the avenue that you're using? Because I obviously I've read a little bit of the books, and I know that Neil's he's an ex-FBI guy, isn't he? So
Neil is me, like anybody who knows me. And
right, okay, that's what I'm trying to get to. Okay, Neil's you. Okay.
Neil is me. Purdue, the main character, her name is Marie Perdita. It's a smash of my former partner Aaron, my sister, and me imagining what my daughter would be like when she was older. She's 9 right now. The whole idea of the first book is it's flashbacks to her and her dad, and it's me imagining what I'd be doing teaching my daughter, right?
Okay.
And then putting my daughter in these weird situations.
Okay.
I always say it's because when a guy writes a spy series, everyone, usually it doesn't go well. And I would say it's not a dude spy series, it's a dad, meaning it's got a different flair to it. And I got great reviews. I was actually compared to female authors, which is really rare for having a female lead. The Janet Ivanovich series, a lot of her writing I compared to. And then Frank's journal, anyone who's read it told me they can't look at me the same ever again. It's the killer's perspective, because the whole idea of the Neil Baggio series is the first book starts with Neil getting called back to the FBI. His mentor, Frank Capilano, went on a killing spree, and they couldn't catch him, and the book picks up 4 years later when Frank comes out of hiding and he's killing again.
Now, hold on. I don't want to spoil the book, so tell me if I am. So they know Frank's done the murders?
Yes.
Right. See, because my understanding was that they didn't know Frank's done the murders, but they know he's done the murders. Right, got you. Okay.
It's a chase.
Right, okay, got you. Yeah.
So right out the gate that he did it, and it's a chase. So then when I wrote it, people were like, well, how does an FBI agent become a killer? Like, let's be honest, how does this happen? So then one day I kind of was like, well, let me figure it out. So I started writing it.
Yeah.
The psychological breakdown of how somebody goes from being an FBI agent to a killer and that journey. And it got so dark, I needed something to kind of clear my mind. So I wrote a PG-13 different kind of book, which became the Marie Perdita series.
Gotcha. So again, you've utilized yourself in the original, in the biggest series of your books. In the Baggio series, you've utilized yourself. You've utilized yourself again in the books relating to your daughter. The question is, what is your view of life? What is your view of things?
Well, I'll give you, I guess I always say my T-shirt slogans. I think we give people too much credit, that we like to assume people are malicious. And then I always say, you can't get 3 people to agree on a pizza, especially if you're the one who offers to pay for it. Oftentimes the inner 4-year-old in all of us comes out, and we argue over the fire truck that we haven't touched in 2 years. And at the end of the day, we will assume the worst in other people, but then rationalize the worst in ourselves.
Okay. Good. So putting it in that context then, when you look at, let's say, we could talk books, but let's talk TV, because I think TV, cinema, etc. is more universal now than what books tend to be. So, a TV program people see and generalize it around the world now, especially with Netflix, home box office, etc. And for me, the game that I was in, I hate seeing TV programs that are not realistic. It somehow grates massively, particularly in my field, and it worries me, and I don't like it actually. So I'm wondering, were you, in terms of your books, where you went with that perspective? Did you say it doesn't matter whether it's not realistic, or did you say to yourself, I want to make this as realistic as possible? Which avenue did you go down?
Well, I focused on the psychological aspect of pretty much everything I wrote, so it was less procedural. For example, most of the people who, like, even old professors of mine, people I knew who I went to school with who went into, law enforcement or the FBI, they laughed and they said, this is the closest thing I've ever read to what it's like in this life, because there is downtime. It's not you get a lead and 2 seconds later, boom, solved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I actually remember I got this amazing review that I thought was an insult. My editorial director had to walk me off the ledge, and it was, Charles writes nothing better than any author I've ever, read. And I was like, who the hell is that? And he was like, that's a compliment, man.
Yeah.
He's like, they're saying that they enjoy that you could write a scene where all he's doing is drinking coffee and talking, and they would enjoy it. And I'm like, oh, my bad.
No, that's good. That's good.
There are scenes like that, like you get a lead, but then you're just kind of talking because nothing does happen, right? Like, it takes time. Like, things don't happen as fast as people see on TV. I follow this fireman on TikTok. He's one of my favorites. He does these bits every once in a while where, I think he's an EMT, a fireman EMT, and he does these bits where he makes fun. He's normal, like, things I've seen is his normal bit. But then every once in a while he does, he makes fun of TV. He's like, yeah, that's right. He goes, as you're pushing their stomach and describing their rib cage. He's like, you nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And but I do think, I always do laugh too how TV shows get away with stuff you can't get away with in a book, right? You can, if you mention that there's going to be a phone call in a book and you don't do that callback, you get roasted. Yet in a movie or a TV show, you can skip a huge glaring thing as long as it's flashy, and most people don't pick up on it. And I'm always just like, it must be nice.
Yeah. So is your work televisual? Would you argue that your work is televisual or not?
Most people say my books read like TV. I've had people say they haven't read a book, or like their husband. One of my favorite ladies, she still jokes to this day that Neil Baggio is her spirit animal. She said she's a one of them, they call book talk or bookstagrammer. She's a huge reader. She said her husband never reads any of the books that she reads, but whenever I release a new book, he wants it right after.
Brilliant.
So she doesn't do it with any other book. He's like, I can read this, and I'm like, that's how I got into writing. I wanted to write something that people would read. And I actually had a father, actually on more than one occasion, who's a big reader now, like who's retired, said they've been able to get their sons to read with them because I write at a fast pace that's edible, that's quick. I write heavy dialogue that's quick. It's just different. So it's it's cool to me to know that I can bring more people to the table.
And you've got several awards. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, which I always laugh. I'm like, yeah, but did I get any money for it? My editors, are like, no, but it's a big deal. And I'm like, whatever. Yeah, I actually won 2 Pencrafts in the same year too, which apparently.
So can you explain what that is for the viewers? A Pencraft?
The Pencraft Award is kind of the highest award you can get for an independent publisher. And I won one for Veritas, one for Colloquium in the same year for suspense thriller. And I've won a couple others for like smaller, we took a couple scenes out of One Golden Day and made it a young adult book, and that started winning awards for young adult. I'm the kind of guy who just doesn't, I don't look at the publishing industry the same way. Normally they're like, well, once you've written the book, you kind of leave it out there. And I go, well, why? Like, why can't I adjust it? Why can't I listen to my audience and say, well, maybe I need to tweak something, right? Like, it just makes sense. And I had a parent say, if you removed these 3 lines, I would give it to my kid. and it wasn't R-rated. It was PG-13, like Fox on a Friday in 1997, and I was like, okay. So I did. And then I submitted it to 4 festivals as a young adult, and it won all 3 festivals.
Incredible. Like, I mean, I'm interested in that.
That was easy. I didn't even tell my staff I did it. And they were like, when did you do this? And I was like, I don't know.
I'm interested in the whole publishing aspect because, as you know, I talk about geopolitics, secret intelligence, etc. on this program. Now, I wrote my memoir, which I had a publisher for, a primary publisher, etc. And then, of course, we started getting hits from our government in terms of, we don't like this, we don't like that. Manuscript. And I'd submitted it to them. I did everything one needs to do in the correct format. And then they come back with basically 3/4 of the book, if not more, redacted. And I'd self-redacted, to be fair, self-vetted, the book down to about, let's say about a quarter, if not less, of my career. So
you walked down the street, got a cup of coffee, and came home. Essentially.
So I'd already done that. So when I then get, frankly, 95% of the book in black, then I say, hang on, I've already redacted most of this process anyway. How the hell they're expecting me to do more? And so I battled them. It took me about 4 years and some money. Some people making objections, including the Prime Minister, etc. So finally, my publisher got fearful and he jumped out. So I self-published and finally got it through. And I was happy to make any redactions. So my question to you is this: knowing that and knowing how the big publishers function, where they won't put up any fight to defend an individual on anything, how is your company or your company any different? Now, I understand you're obviously doing fiction, but how is your company different? Are you willing to let the author put themselves forward as they see it, or are you directing, dictating, flowing with the wind if you get a bit of resistance? How do you function in your publishing world now, not in your writing world?
I would say ROI. So we had an author, Ray Franz, who is in the crime fiction world, meaning he is related to Al Capone's world. His great uncle was pretty high up in Al Capone's family, like in opera. Okay. So he had access to files that most people don't have access to. His family was pretty mad when he was writing the book. Big publishers were willing to take the book, but they weren't going to really help. They would just kind of take it and slap it. We worked with them for over a year we're like, first of all, the story's not done. He's like, it's already so long. I'm like, that's great. We'll help you edit it down, or it'll be 2 books, but it's not done. So let's start with the story number 1, and then we'll figure it out from there. And then the question becomes, what's the ROI? Meaning, if I can get you on a bunch of news channels because we're ticking people off, and then I go, okay, if the publicity and the sales can cover the legal fees and we can still make some money, okay, we'll figure it out. Because then, I mean, seriously, let's say I break even on the book, but then I can sell other books just from the publicity, then I'd probably still do it. That's just good business.
So that was the end of part 1 of this week's 2-part episode, which you'll hear next week. Hope you stay with me and hope you've enjoyed this week's, and we'll get back to the discussion next week. See you then.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, And don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
For more than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.